And we're the ones, for the most part, that have told other men that I don't want to see you cry. I don't want to see you vulnerable. I don't want to see you open up. I don't want to see you admit that you don't know something. Like, you have to be that strong, independent leader that everyone can count on and nothing else. If you don't show strength, you show anger. Those two things. If you have to show an emotion other than that, go to the back of the room and turn around. We don't want to see it.
Welcome to the Derelict Podcast. For the disparaged, depleted, and delinquent souls trying to find our way, we're talking about the scary part of the journey, where we don't know how it'll end. Let's be free to face our fucking failures in real time as the most unadulterated, truest version of who we are. No sugarcoating. Welcome to the shit show, you derelict.
Welcome, you derelicts, to the Derelict Podcast. I am your host, Josh Abandonato, and here we are with another episode. And today, we're going to be talking about how to raise boys into strong men. And then even, why is it that sometimes there's a lot of focus on girls becoming strong, independent women, but boys are getting overlooked? I don't know. True? Not true? Pay attention. Let's see if it is. So we have a guest here, Mark Pezant. So grateful that you're here, Mark. How are you, man?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the invite. Looking forward to the conversation.
Absolutely. And our pre-conversation was obviously what intrigued me, and we're just getting to know each other. But, man, you had a lot of really good things to say. So, Mark, a couple things about Mark real quick before he can, introduce himself as well. But he is a certified personal trainer. He is host of the Relatively Normal podcast, which I'll have you explain here in a second, and also the 6 a.m. Run podcast, which, I think just by the name, most people can probably figure out what that means. He shares a lot about his experiences with ADHD, anxiety, and depression. Raise your hand if you have those, everybody. I'm raising my hand. He shows no one's alone, and there's always someone willing to listen, especially when it comes to coping and managing all kinds of stress. Now, this is one thing that Mark had in his bio that I just thought was so good that I'm actually just going to read it. I know I never do this on the podcast, but I'm going to because I wanted to read it word for word. This is what he said. He said, however, even after getting in shape, dropping over 100 pounds at one point, which, by the way, Mark, nice work, man. That's insanely amazing. I noticed that I needed a way to combine both my physical health and my mental health. I'm going to kind of pause there right now. If you're a man listening or watching this podcast, or if you're a woman, that's fine. Raise your hand if you've ever had difficulty with that, because before I get on to Mark's further quote and let him talk and me start being a host and me listening more, which will happen, the one thing that I've noticed, and maybe we can talk about this later, Mark, is, man, it seems like 90% of the guys out there, social media or wherever else, it's always why they're hitting the gym, running, the gym, running, the gym, running, the gym. It's always physical, right? And combining the physical and the mental and even spiritual, man, I'm excited to talk about that, especially when we talk about raising boys in this society. So what he said was, I needed a way to combine both my physical health and mental health. I needed to work on both of them together, find a way to mesh the two, and I did. Whether I run or go to the gym, I make sure to do it in a mindful way so I can be the best version of myself. As a husband and father of 2 impressionable girls, I want to make sure I do everything to be around for them as long as I can. I want to show them that the daddy can be the strong protector that this family needs, but I can always be that empathetic family man they deserve. Man, that was just, again, it was so powerful. I just wanted to read it word for word. So I love that. Like, as we're talking about raising boys, raising girls even, I want to hear a little bit more about kind of your story and what led up to not just losing a bunch of weight and going on runs and hitting the gym and everything else, but then how you were able to kind of bring the physical and mental together. Like what happened in your life to bring you to that point? Was there like a singular moment that you remember that it led up to, or was it multiple? I'll let you take it wherever you want with that question.
Well, first and foremost, thank you so much for that great intro, and I appreciate you mentioning those things because I wrote that a while ago, and I've gone back to it a couple times. I've never changed it. I've never gone and wanted to tweak it or anything like that. That is something I'm dead set on doing and continuing to do in my life. I was always into sports when I was younger. Like I was always, that was me, soccer and basketball. And then I'd come home from school and I'd play baseball with my friends. I played football with my friends. So if there was a sport to be played, I played it. I was continually active. And, I'll go ahead and say it right now. Once they were over, once I quit playing soccer in college, I didn't know how to take care of myself. That had never been my responsibility. I'd always have coaches or trainers or someone telling me to wake up at 5 a.m. for 2-a-days or things like that. And I never had the motivation to do it myself. I was just told to do it. And if I wanted to stay on the team, if I wanted to play, these are things I did. So, here's me gaining over 100 pounds in my 20s because I wasn't playing sports, and I found out,
What was it? Was it mainly, just a quick question, was it mainly the motivation that was gone? Because your motivation, obviously, in high school and everything is, look, if you want to play, if you want to be on the team, if you want to do this, then you have to do these things. And then all of a sudden, that's gone. So why would I keep doing it? Was that why?
Yeah, it was me believing that I had to be motivated and inspired, and not really understanding the discipline that was involved. Like motivation, inspiration, they can take you so far. They can take you to the lower levels of the atmosphere. But if you want to go to the moon, like you need the discipline to get there. So I was constantly like craving the motivation and inspiration, and it never came. And I was like, okay, well, today it'll come, or tomorrow, whatever happens. I just kind of figured I'll get to it. But and this kind of led, at this point in my life, it led to, of course, body image issues and not wanting to be the heavy set guy or the fat guy, the overweight guy, and using a lot of comedy and a lot of jest to keep people at bay when it came to my weight. And
you would joke about your own weight?
I was a funny, likable guy. I was a funny, likable guy that would make fun of himself just to kind of cut you at the knees so you couldn't make fun of me.
Yeah.
And every one of the jokes, every one of the, hey, big guys, or, Mark can't, all those, they hurt, but, I kept a smile on my face. And it took a long time for me to understand that, all right, well, me sitting around just feeling sorry for myself is not going to change anything. But, the part that I talk about all the time is what you kind of alluded to, is thinking that, okay, if I'm not happy with the way I look, if I'm not happy with my weight, if I'm also not happy with the feelings I have inside and in my mindset, I thought, okay, if I drop some weight, I will be happy. If I just absolutely go balls to the wall at the gym, run as much as I can, run to exhaustion, starve myself. If I do these things and lose a bunch of weight, I am going to be the happiest guy in the world. And it did not happen that way. And honestly, looking back or doing the research I've done and being in the places I've been, like, it rarely ever works. If it ever does.
It doesn't. Because that's not. So let me ask you a question, though, because I'm curious, because we live in a world where you can't open up Instagram without seeing an ad that basically says, well, here's a diet that will make you skinny, which will make you happy, right?
Correct.
I mean, that's the idea behind it. Can you remember why you felt that way? Like, why did you feel that, hey, if I just lose this weight, I'm going to be happy?
You know what? That's a good question. And it probably had a lot to do with social influences. It probably had a lot to do with the people that I hung out with who were always in shape. And I didn't really surround myself with people who were bad influences. Like I basically went through and I think people understand what I'm saying, like a friend cleansing, or a friend early in my 20s or my mid 20s, where I was like, man, some of these people are toxic. Like, I don't want this energy in my life. And I really started shrinking my circle. And, you know, my circle was a group of, and listen, like I said, I played sports when I was younger. So, of course, I'm going to be surrounded by athletes and former college athletes and high school athletes, and all these guys still play. Because I was still playing basketball at this time, and I'd still go play on Wednesdays, and I play in a couple leagues. And I realized, like, man, I can't last more than a game. My knees are killing me. Like, I love playing this game, but I feel like I'm just worthless out there in the court.
Yeah.
You know, I went from being like a slasher and a cutter to like just a spot up shooter because I just couldn't get back and forth. And so, you know, that is a great question, which I think if you were to ask 100 men, you might get 100 different answers, because some might say that's just what people told me. Some might say social media. Some might say I don't know. It's just, you know, I figure if my body felt better, I would feel better. But that's the core of it. I literally thought, you know, I don't want the little snarky responses about my weight anymore that are kind of disguised as love, and oh man, we love you, man. That's why we're saying the things we're saying. It's like,
yeah,
well,
for sure.
Absolutely. I don't want to hear it. Like, I don't want to hear it. And my girlfriend, who's my wife now, at the time, she would get really upset about it. And why are they saying that about you? Or you shouldn't let them say that about you. And it's like, oh, they're just guys being guys. Don't worry about it. Like, they mean nothing but love, and which is a way that men show like affect. They wouldn't say anything to me if I wasn't likable or if I wasn't their friend. And so
it's true, but I'm curious.
Yeah.
I want to pause you on that, though, because I'm curious now, looking back on it, though, do you feel the same way?
No, I don't. You know, it's one of those things where I look back and there's nothing that I see that they really did was quote unquote harmful through their eyes. Like, at no point I had an opportunity to bring one to the side and be like, hey man, you know, I appreciate you, I love you, and I'd really appreciate if you didn't make any, you know, say anything about my weight or things like that. I had that opportunity and I didn't. Now, looking back, if I did the same thing to someone else, which I hope I didn't, you know, growing up in a household where fitness was big and my mother lost a lot of weight and my brother and I stayed in shape, and it's always been something that we've been taught to stay in physical shape. I hope I knew better. Like, I hope I knew better, but then again, like, I can't say that for certain. But knowing what I know now and going through what I've been going through, like, the one thing I don't joke about with people or say anything about is body image stuff, to a point where it's like, I don't know what that person's going through. I don't know if there's a thyroid condition. I don't know if they're going through something stressful and they've been stress eating. I don't know what it is, but I want to make sure I'm respectful. And if they bring something to me, and I've had friends come to me and say, hey, I need your help to shed a couple pounds or get in shape. Like, I'm more than willing to do that, but I'm not going to put myself out there or put them in a place where they have to be like, I didn't think anything was wrong with me. Like, why is Mark bringing up my weight now? So I'm very cautious about when I talk to people about bodies and shapes and things like that, because I do want people to listen. I do want people to feel comfortable in their own body. However, I do want people to live the best life they can at the same time.
Yeah, that's actually what I was going to ask you on that, is that I completely get that, and I completely understand how you want to be sensitive to their feelings and how they're doing and everything else. And I've gone through weight fluctuations as well in my life, not as big as yours, but I've still gone through some and felt, you know, a lot of it for me has always been how secure I feel with my body, not necessarily what the number is, right? But I'm curious, when does that line get crossed where, you know, you feel like somebody that you actually can speak into their life, and they are 100 pounds overweight and they're obese and they have all these health issues because of the fact that they are? When does it get to that point where you can, like, lovingly talk to them about it? Does it ever get to that point, or do you always just say, eh?
It does. It does. And I'm glad you brought up that word secure, because at my heaviest, which I was 321 was my heaviest, and I'm 6'5", so 321 to some people are like, oh, that's cool.
You're 6'5"?
Yeah, I'm 6'5", yeah.
Oh man, I should have made you stand up before the interview so I could talk.
So, you know, and I remember
Wait, so what's okay? So you're I'm sorry, just because 6'5".
Mm-hmm.
So you were at 325, you said?
321 at the heaviest.
And then you went down to 221.
So I went, so even more, so this is why I want to talk to you about secure, because it's one of those things which is amazing to me, because at 321, I remember if I was in a certain suit and tie and a look, like I was secure how I looked. I felt confident because, clothes does make the man a lot of the times. Like people, that's kind of a lost art, but I'm not the guy that's going to yell at young people from my porch and like it is what it, like I'm not going to do that. However, there's times I felt secure. Now, when I was gaining the weight and I got to like 275, 280, 290, I remember people just saying, oh, like the weight looks good on you. You're tall. Like, don't worry about it. And I'm like, man, my back and my knees are killing me. Like, I don't know how these NFL guys do it. But so 321 is where I started. At a certain point, I got down to 204 pounds.
Oh, wow.
So I had lost
at 6'5".
At 6'5".
Holy.
And this is what I want to talk about, because I couldn't go lower on the scale. Like, again, I couldn't go lower on the scale. I had weight in the back of my mind. I wasn't mentally looking out for myself. My body image was way off. I wasn't taking care of my state of mind and my headspace at the time. And I just had to get skinnier and skinnier and lose more weight. And at certain points I was eating 1,000 calories a day and burning 2,500. And, it got to a point where I wasn't secure mentally in any body I was in.
Yeah. I relate to that.
But to answer your question, yes. And I'll tell you right now, my wife has a job, and I told her, if you ever see me slipping up again, if you ever see me not working out, getting, putting the weight back on, I was like, it's your job to call me out. It's your job to do it. And, her response is like, you're going to be mad at me and we're not going to. I was like, listen, I will get over it. I will get over it. I'll say I'm sorry. I'll probably apologize to you, but this is your job. And I am not telling people to go out to random people or even business associates or even people who you don't have a personal relationship with.
Right.
Don't do that. However, if you are a man that calls yourself a friend to another man, and I won't speak for ladies, because I know better than that. And I know better than that.
You mean you don't want to do the rest of the podcast that's just talking about the mental thing of ladies because we're such experts at it? Yeah.
Such experts, yes. Now, but I will say this. If you call yourself a friend and you're close, and I don't think there's any issue with you just saying, can I just have a conversation with you? Can we sit down and, no TV's on, nobody around you, anything like that, and have ask the question if you can have an open and honest conversation with this person. And if they come back and say, listen, no, I like what we have going on, I like the dynamic, then that's fine. You tried. However, I know if one of my friends had sat down and talked to me and said, hey, Mark, I love you to death, man. I want you to be around forever. I knew you when you were this size, and now I've seen you at this size. Is there something going on? Like, I'd love to help you out and love to be a part of any fitness journey you want to go on. Like, and that sounds super awkward to a lot of us, because it is. Like, it's supposed to be. Like, the last omelet you make, the eggs weren't, pre-cracked. Like, here's the thing. Like, being awkward, having an awkward feeling, that's progress. Like, nothing that's worth getting ever came from you being comfortable. And that's what I learned the hard way. And when I mean the hard way, I learned from, having stress fractures in my feet because of the weight. I learned from having knee issues and back issues, and most likely being pre-diabetic. And, knock on wood, I have no idea how I never got hypertension. I have no idea how that never happened, because it runs in my family and I was overweight. But, the awkwardness, once I get in that awkwardness, that tells me progress is being made. That's how my brain has now, shifted. Back when I was being awkward in my 20s, it was like, I don't want to be in this space. I got to get out of it really quickly. But now it's like, okay, I thrive in the awkwardness, because that's where I know I'm building myself up and helping other people build themselves. And that's why I teach I want my girls and the girls that I coach and the people I train, I tell them all the time, when they're doing certain exercises or when something doesn't come naturally, I tell them all the time, live in this moment, live in it. Oh, coach, I can't do this, or coach, it's hard for me to do this. And it's good. Don't confuse being bad at something with being inexperienced with it. If I wasn't doing my part, then you wouldn't be uncomfortable right now. I want you to be uncomfortable. So that's kind of how, and I'm trying to instill that in young people now, because they don't have to go the path I went through where it's oh, my 30s, now I'm figuring it out. But it's 30s is better than not figuring out at all. So I've understood that.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of great things you said, and maybe just a couple things that I'll comment on real quick. Number one is, this entire podcast is not going to be about health and whether you're healthy and that sort of thing. Probably, we'll see where it goes. But one of the things that I will mention as well is that it's also not necessarily about weight. Let's just be honest here, right? You can have all those health problems and be skinny. Skinny fat, right, is what they call it sometimes, where the inside of your body is still just as unhealthy as the outside. So this is not necessarily just, do I fit a societal norm of how skinny or fat I'm supposed to be? It's also, how are you taking care of your body, right? You could be, these guys because you've seen them before, the string beans that you see wherever they are, and they just eat from Plaid Pantry or 7-Eleven all day long, and literally are way unhealthier than somebody that's maybe 50, 60, 70 pounds overweight in a lot of ways because of what they're putting in their body, right?
Correct. And
so
there's
that's
that.
Why,
and then, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say one other thing too is that, anybody that listens or watches this at all knows that I have a man crush on Tony Robbins. And one of the things that because he's the GOAT, and one of the things that he does in his conferences that I absolutely love is that when we're in the process of trying to figure something out, so we're on some sort of thing that we're doing, it depends on which conference, on what we're doing. We're working on a goal or a vision or a master plan of our business or whatever. Right. One of the things that he has the audience do, which is really powerful, is that anytime somebody's talking about something and then they get confused, like you were talking about earlier, he has the entire room clap for them. Because what he says is, when you're confused or when something's awkward or when something's uncomfortable, that's when you're on the precipice of a breakthrough. So I completely agree with you. And that's true for us friends, right? I personally, as a guy who used to struggle with codependency back in the day, I have a hard time still sometimes addressing friends when they need to be addressed, or at least when I feel like they are. And you said a couple really great things that I just want to reiterate. Number one is ask your friend, right? Be like, look, something's really been on my heart that I want to chat with you about. Are you open to a conversation? It could be that simple. Yep. And just see if they're open. Because if they're like, no, I'm not open, I don't want to hear about your shit. Okay, fine. But if they're open, great. Then pick a place, like you said, even if it's on the phone, whatever. But make sure that it's uninterrupted, right? Don't be watching a football game at the same time. Don't be on your phones. Do it where you can just have presence. Because you need that presence so that when you look in their eyes and you say, I love you, man, and I really care about you, and I'm really concerned because I've seen that you gained weight, and I just want to know what's going on in your life. What am I missing? How can I be here for you? How can I support you? And you can say that, like that. Who's not going to like that?
Right.
I would love it if somebody said that to me. Not, you're a fat ass. Get off your ass and go for a run and stop eating Twinkies. That's not going to help, right? That's just going to be yeah, this is what I think about that, right? The other thing that I want to just briefly talk about that you talked about quite a while ago, but I want to come back to, and this is something that I've been thinking a lot about recently, and I think I'm going to talk about it here again on a podcast. I've talked about it on podcasts before, but there's have you heard of, I'm not sure if you've heard of it or not, but I'll just say it. So David McClellan was a professor at Harvard Business School. Maybe he still is, I don't know. And he did a study, and it was all about success. And he found out that 99% of everybody's success in this reference group, in this study group, was based on their reference group. So let me explain what a reference group is. This is going back to your talk about who you're hanging out with and whether they're in shape or their mental attitude was good and that sort of thing. A reference group is described as the top 5 people you spend the most time with. And what he found is much of that also came from the number 1 person that you spend the most time with, which in a lot of people's situation, not mine, but a lot of people's situation is your spouse, your partner, your girlfriend, boyfriend, etc. So again, let me rephrase that. What he found in this study, 99% of someone's success was based on the top 5, primarily the top 1 person that they spent time with. That's powerful. So to your point earlier, who are you surrounding yourself with? Are you surrounding yourself with people that are in shape? They work on their bodies, they work on their mind, maybe even more importantly, they work on their spirit, their soul. Are they trying to get better? Are they in an active process of healing and learning from their mistakes and dealing with their failures? Like this show's all about dealing with our failures real time. I have failures all the time, so I come on here and I'm trying to be vulnerable with my failures. And to be honest, one of the things that I'm even struggling with right now, too, is my 5-person group the 5-person group it needs to be for the next stage of my life? You know, I just turned 40 8 months ago, and it's been a wild ride so far. Wild ride that I did not expect, to be honest. A shit ton of stuff has happened this year. And one of the things, now that a lot of the kind of more dramatic things have calmed down for me, the thing that's been on my mind a lot is, are the 5 people that I'm surrounded with right now really the type of person that I want to be? And frankly, you know, and maybe someone will listen to this podcast and start wondering, is it me? Who are you talking about? But frankly, I think that there's a couple of them that aren't. And then what do you do about that when you have so much history and background, and like you were talking about? You know, it's not easy just being like, peace, I'm out. Right? But I guess it's, you know, it's the old adage, choose your hard. Your hard could either be, well, I'm going to stick with these people and just be okay with my life and not progress the way I want it to. Or it's going to be, maybe I have to change some relationships. Not like they have to drop or anything, but maybe I just have to change and update some relationships so I can get to where I want to go. So I love the fact that you brought that up with your wife too, because again, one of the main reasons of your success right there. Okay. It's proven, right? Yep. And if she's not willing to do it, then you have to decide what to do about that, right? That doesn't mean you get a divorce. I mean, it could. Who knows? But it could also just mean, okay, great. Maybe she's not in that category, but I have to find somebody who is.
Right. And I've noticed as I've gotten older and gone on these journeys in my life, these little sagas where like there are stages in my life, is even if I haven't intentionally changed my friend group has changed with me. And there have been some who have stayed the course with me because they have matured in the fashion that I have. And I'll tell you right now, the people who I resonate the most with is the people who work the hardest in their lives, and they're driven, and their grind. You know, their grind is what attracts me to them. And I have friends who are other podcast hosts who have started their own, and their entrepreneurial spirit. I have a friend who is he's on the underground hip hop scene, and he's also a real estate agent. So I see him putting the work in and grinding behind the scenes. You know, I see a guy who has worked himself up from a 2-year degree to becoming an engineer. So, and I didn't plan on that. Like, for some reason, I thought about it one day, probably 2 or 3 years ago. And I was like, everyone I've surrounded myself with, they're not at the clubs every night. They're not going out drinking, you know, every weekend and watching the game. Like, these are guys that are in their house after work, putting in the work for their craft and trying to better themselves and make a name. And like, that's what I'm doing. Like, they're doing what I'm doing. So I can easily pick up a phone or send a text and be like, hey man, I'm working on this and I've been up all night. And I have someone who understands what I'm going through. Like none of my friends that I'm close to, and I have a really tight knit group of friends. There's no one I can text that I have messages with that says, "Hey, I wish I could hang out with you and your buddies, at this weekend trip or week, whatever it is," because everybody, for the most part, is working their butt off so they can leave a legacy for themselves or their kids or like literally we're at kids soccer games or kids basketball games or doing something with the family and then working on our side projects, going to work. Like, I'm not saying there's no time for fun, but that's the group that I've surrounded myself with.
Yeah, and I think for me at least, and maybe this will resonate with some people as well. Like, I also, how do I say that? I think especially as men, we can also fall into workaholism. So let's try to distinguish that for a second. Mm-hmm. That doesn't necessarily mean that you are so obsessed with whatever you're working on that everything else falls by the wayside and you don't have relationships and you're on your 4th marriage or 5th marriage or 6th marriage or 7th marriage or just gave up on marriage altogether and whatever, blah, 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 right? Because that's not a healthy lifestyle either. But what I hear you saying, at least how I'm resonating with it, is that I love being around people and surrounding myself with people that have a calling, a purpose, a mission. Like they have something they're going for. Mm-hmm. And they're okay if they don't get it, or they'll do everything they can to get it, depending on what happens. But that's what they're committed to. Mm-hmm. And not only are they committed to it, but this is something I've had to kind of learn the hard way over the years as well. You can't just be committed to it, and it can't just be, mouth vomit.
Right.
Like, are you doing the work to get it done? Because if you're not getting the work to get it done, shut your fucking mouth. Because I don't want to hear it.
Easy as that.
Right. I don't want to hear. If you say that you have a mission or a purpose we all fuck up, man. I mean, there's plenty of days where I don't want to, it's hard for me to get out of bed, or it's hard for me to even like put in the work that I don't want to do, or I'm like, God, I have to edit another episode or whatever, right? We all have those days. But do you push through it? Do you figure out a way to make it done because it's important enough to you? Is your why strong enough? So to me, it's not necessarily about how many hours are you putting in. It's, are you committed? And are you actually doing what you say you're doing?
Right.
Because again, number one, guilty. So many times in my life and other people that I see, they say something. They say they're committed to it. They say that this is all that matters to them. And their actions don't show it. And the older I get in my life, the less I have respect for those people. You know who I have more respect for, Mark? Is somebody who either says it and doesn't do it and then calls out themselves. And they're like, I'm full of shit. I'm not actually doing this. Right? Like, I have shit ton of respect for that guy. That's great. Just be honest about it. Or don't say that you're going to do it and don't do it.
Right.
I have respect for that also.
Yeah.
Right? But are you being consistent with yourself? Are you being truthful? Or are you just lying to yourself about whatever's happening? So, maybe this actually would be a good time to transition into what I definitely want to talk about before we end here. And that is, how do we instill this in our kids? And I know you have 2 girls, so it's maybe a little hard to talk about how you're growing a boy because you're not a dad of a boy, but you work with a lot. There's also this whole idea of boy psychology versus man psychology, which I'll just throw out here for a second. And there's a lot of men out there by age that are still boys.
Yeah.
Like, let me give you an example. Last night, as of the time of this recording, I went with my neighbor, who's a friend of mine. We always have a great time together. We went to a local bar that has a pool table. And, I don't drink, so I'm sitting there just kind of drinking my water. But we're also playing pool, which I always enjoy doing with him. And he's much better than me, so I learn from him. And I feel like even my games increased only the few times we played together. Right. And that's one of the things I love about it as well. But anyway, there are these 2 people there. They're a couple. And I start talking to the lady for a bit. And she talks about, one of the things she tells me is she's like, oh, yeah, well, my son just kind of moved back in with him while he's trying to find himself. He's 35. And it took everything inside of me, Mark, not to be like, what? What is he trying to find?
Yeah.
Maybe he should go fucking work, get off his ass, and not have his little mommy save him. He's 35 years old. Are you kidding me? You can do that when you're 15. But the only reason I bring that up is, again, that's boy psychology. This man is 35 years old, living in his mom's house as a boy. So this comes to the question that we wanted to talk about. I don't remember how I wrote it. Oh, this is how I wrote it. I just wanted to read exactly how I wrote it. I said, what should we be doing to raise boys to be vulnerable, accepting of failures, and also not turning into boys for life?
And this is, part of this is, you're absolutely correct, where I am raising two girls, and they are an absolute pain in my backside and a joy and a joy at the same time.
How old are they, just for context?
10 and 9, and about to be 11 and 9 in a couple months, and both of them play sports, and I've coached one of them for a couple seasons in soccer, and the other one has guest played with me in soccer a couple times, and they're both good. Listen, they're both good girls, and one's a daddy's girl, one's a mommy's girl. Both their default mechanisms are mommy's girls. So as much as I love the older one, when things really go south, like she's a mommy's girl. Because I hold them accountable. Like I hold them accountable, and they sometimes they don't, actually often they don't like that. It's like, oh, Daddy said I wasn't going to get this if I didn't do this, and well, you're not getting it. Like that's how I work. I apologize if someone has coddled you into thinking that you will get these things, and then like the next day I'll get them ice cream together, and their mother looks at me like, oh yeah. Right, you're the tough guy, right?
You're so tough. Well, I mean, the daughters are always going to have that strings on your heart, right?
Yeah,
I'm in the exact same spot, Mark. So my son is 11, and then my daughters are 9 and 7. So I'm right there with you as far as ages.
So you know.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, the girls obviously, and I have a son as well, so I feel like I have a perspective here. And the girls specifically, of course, I do the same thing with all of them. I'm very similar to you as a dad, and I hold them to what they commit to, et cetera. And it gets a little complicated sometimes because we live in different households, and sometimes their mom wants them to do something, sometimes they do it. So it's hard trying to figure out, like, are they actually committing to this, or is their mom just committing to them? That's a whole another thing.
Yeah.
But I try to keep them to that. But then, like you said, man, but then the little like puppy eyes come out. I'm like, okay, we'll get ice cream.
It's like, Daddy, but it's like, don't talk. You can't talk anymore.
Yeah, right.
It's
just no. Go to your room.
Yeah, go to your room.
Daddy's insecure right now about his decision. This has nothing to do with you. Go to your room.
But the reason I say this is because I'm a twin. I have a twin brother. I have an older sister and a twin brother, and my brother and I were both raised by a strict yet fair father, rigid in his thoughts, very, he was a CPA and an accountant and double mat. Like, he's very rigid in his thoughts and numbers, had a great personality, but literally, like, the world worked for him in a way where it's like, it's very structured, very rigid. And that was kind of perfect setup for my brother. Like, it was perfect setup for him. He's now a Navy officer, a nuclear engineer.
I was just going to say military. It sounds like a military household. Yeah, absolutely.
And, I was the emotional, like, let me do things because I feel this way type. I was very, I make jokes all the time. I was a center of attention. We both excelled in sports, but, like, when it came to, schoolwork, like, he excelled there. When it came to, like, worldly and more common sense and reading a room type thing, like, that was me. Was me. But raising us, my dad would always instill, like, we expect you to mature into men who give back to society, men who are productive, men who are self-reliant and interdependent. And it wasn't that he sat us down and said, hey, as your father, this is what you two are supposed to do. And then my mother sat my sister down and says, as your mother, like, it was not that. It wasn't, but it was, we saw the things that my dad did. We saw that he was not just a hard worker, but he was available, for my mother and for us. He was at almost every soccer or basketball game. He was the breadwinner of the house. He took care of himself physically. he made sure that he was up on, current events. He was able to hold rooms and hold conversations. Like, he was the total package of a father. Like, he really was. And I am grateful to this day. He's still with us. Like, it was his birthday last week, and we took him out for dinner at his favorite spot. And it was just a great occasion where he was just around people who loved him, and his grandchildren, and his sons and his daughter. And it was great. And I say that in a way, not to say that's what everybody should get, or that's what everybody should. I say that in a way because that's my perspective. And when I don't see people having what I had growing up, regardless if they had a father in the home or not, like, that's not what I'm saying here. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that is my perspective. Is that's what is a good way to teach boys to be men, because that's what happened in my life. And if ever I was not being a man, or if ever there was things going on in my life where I need to be called out, my dad called me out. And at the time, I felt like shit. Like, at the time, I felt like, why is he picking on me? Why is he doing these things? No, he had been down that road before. He knew he knew this outcome. Like, I didn't know all the answers. I was that jerk 20-something-year-old kid that I thought I knew everything. And in the back of his head, it's like, Mark doesn't know everything. And I guess somebody has to, like, tell him he doesn't know everything. And that's one of the things, like, I preach now to the girls that I coach. We even had acronyms for the teams, and one of the acronyms for the A is accept that you don't know everything. That is one of the things I tell 10, 11, 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds, like, accept that. You don't want to know everything. Like, accept that you know everything, and that opens up your mind to learning. And that was one of the toughest parts for me growing up, is accepting that I didn't know everything about being a man, or being a father, or being a brother, or being a cousin, being an employee. I walked into new jobs thinking I knew everything. And so the reason I say all this is because, I'm instilling this into my girls. Like, I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. Like, I'm instilling into them. I'm being empathetic, throughout it. I'm not yelling at them because they don't get something the first time. However, I want to make sure the way this world is set up, and a lot of times people will look at me sideways when I say this, but I just want people to understand, and I'm not, this is not hyperbole, I'm just being a realist, that this society has been set up by men for the most part. And people are like, wait a second, like, what do you mean? Just listen for a second. And we're the ones, for the most part, that have told other men that I don't want to see you cry, I don't want to see you vulnerable, I don't want to see you open up, I don't want to see you admit that you don't know something. Like, you have to be that strong, independent leader that everyone can count on, and nothing else. If you don't show strength, you show anger. Those two things. If you have to show an emotion other than that, go to the back of the room and turn around. We don't want to see it. So I want people to understand, like, when I talk about men opening up and being vulnerable and understanding that they don't have to know all the answers, like, I'm not putting this on, women. I'm not putting this on the society. What I'm putting this on is everyone to understand that men have a right, just like anyone else, to not know what's going to happen next, or to not have all the answers. And I'm telling men out there who are listening, like, I am not expecting you to have all the answers. I'm expecting you to stay in a growth mindset. Let's be honest about something. Like, if you don't know the answer, that's not the end of it. Like, I want you to go find it. Don't come to me and say, hey, Mark, what is it? I want you to go find it. But I want to live in a society where the shoulds kind of go away. And it's like, oh, he should be this, or he should be that. And, the thing that saddens me about all this is that now, as women are gaining independence, are gaining strength, and finding their voice, which I am a total supporter in, we see a lot of women turning around and kind of shitting on men for being vulnerable and being in their own skin. And at no point do I want to make this sexist versus, I don't want to do men versus women. I'm never into that. And I've had this conversation with women a lot. And they're kind of turned off by it too, where it's kind of this them versus us mentality online. Why doesn't my man do this? Or we can't trust these women, or blah, blah, blah. And it's like, come on, let's stop with that.
You're right. But what this really comes back to, like we were talking about earlier, is this really comes back to boy psychology versus man psychology. Like,
yes.
In my extremely humble opinion, if men acted like men and women acted like women, we would not have those problems. Because all a woman really wants, and she doesn't necessarily know this either, because here I am. I'm going to tell all the women what they want. Ready? Yes. This is going to be great. This is going to get me canceled. What all women really want, from my perception, from everyone that I've ever talked to, is they just want men to be men. And they don't want them to be little boys. Little boys, as men, doesn't matter if you're 80 years old, you could still be a little boy. Little boy psychology will say there are acceptable emotions for you to show and unacceptable emotions for you to show. And in our society, acceptable emotions for men are like anger would be an example.
Yep.
That's acceptable. It's acceptable for a man to be angry. It is not acceptable for a man to be depressed. It is acceptable. It's more acceptable now for a man to be anxious. It is not acceptable for a man to be sad, right? And by the way, same thing for women. It's acceptable for a woman to feel hurt or sad. It is not acceptable for a woman to be angry, right? So we have these societal norms of what emotions are acceptable, what emotions are not acceptable. But what I would say is that the reason that at the very core, the very heart of this is, I agree with you, men that really are boys that are telling other men how to behave. And that's not, is that who you want to follow? It's not who I want to follow. Forget that, man. I've done that plenty in my life. That's not what I want to do. There's a book that I'm currently reading, which is not new, but I've really enjoyed it. It's called Hard Times Create Strong Men by Stephen Arnio. And I'd recommend it to people that haven't read it. And here's a quote from it that I think I just pulled up because it really reminds me of what you're talking about right now. And he said, "A boy becomes a man when he chooses to take responsibility for everything in his life, when he owns his problems and decides to own the good and the bad and commit to becoming better every day." And I couldn't agree more with that. What that quote also doesn't say is it also doesn't say the man's not going to fail and he's going to succeed at everything that he ever does. That's not what it's saying. Right. It's saying that he's committed to his actions and his problems. And there are so many man boys out there right now that are victims, right? It's somebody else's fault. Somebody else did something else. I mean, God forbid we bring politics into this, but man, we got a bunch of man boys in politics too, just like blaming the other side. Oh, it's that person's fault and it's this person. And if this person gets elected, the whole world's over and blah, 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 right? That's not, I'm not saying that that person's not a man that's doing that. You can be a man and still speak out of your boy psychology, right? I think it's a continual thing where for the rest of my life, I'm going to be trying to remove as much boy psychology as possible. I don't think that you can get perfectly there. It's all a range, right? There's some people that maybe have a lot more than others, right? And my goal is to continually improve and increase my man psychology within me and remove my boy psychology. So it's not saying that this is not, don't hear this, this is not black or white. It's not like you're a boy or you're a man. That's not it. But I just don't ever see boy psychology being a good thing because you're just not owning up to your own problems. And is that exclusive to men? I mean, I don't think so. Like, shouldn't women own their own problems too? You know, again, back to the goat. I remember this one intervention that I was watching him do, and he was talking to this woman, and she literally like couldn't even stop crying the entire time she was talking about what a victim she was. It's a victim from this, a victim from that, victim from this, victim from that, victim from this, victim from that. And instead of coddling her, that a lot of boys do, and instead of yelling at her like a lot of bad men do, toxic masculinity, whatever phrase you want to say to it, he just cut right through it. He's like, look, I understand that bad shit happened to you, but if you live in that and that's where you're at, you're never going to get out of it. You're never going to improve. You're going to be a victim the rest of your life. And as he's doing this with her, she's crying and she's a victim and she's crying and she's talking about all these victim groups and how she's helping all these other victim women. God forbid. Holy shit, right? You want your daughter going to that person? Mm-hmm. As she's doing all this, by the end of the intervention, she woke up. It was like she became this empowered woman just in front of my eyes. Because you can't be empowered whether you're a man or a woman if you're living in victim mentality. It's impossible. That doesn't mean bad shit didn't happen to you. I've had plenty of bad shit happen to me. But are you living in that as in, are you giving the power to the other people that did that stuff to you?
Right.
Or are you willing to take responsibility for whatever actions you had? Because we all have actions, and almost always there's not a whole lot of bad things happen that we didn't contribute to in some way or another.
Right.
There are some. Don't get me wrong. There's outliers. But not most of them, you know, whatever that is. And am I willing to own my problems and actually be responsible for that and then go from there?
And I had, I think you bring up an excellent point when you talk about the boys and the men in relationships, because I had a guest on my show, Jason Lang, who 𝐤𝐸, who helps men with things like this. And he has spoken to women, and what women want is they want to be your wife, your girlfriend, your partner. They don't want to be your mother also. Like they don't want to have to come in and pick up after you, clean up after you, or get you out of victimhood, or say, baby, it's like there are certain times for that when, you know, men take things hard. Like we take things hard, whether it's our favorite team losing a game,
For sure.
or we take things hard. Like we want you to come and comfort us. That's one thing. But if like her job, on top of being the person who you want in your life, sexually, emotionally, spirit, all that stuff, on top of that, if she has to like be your mom too, that is taxing. That is very taxing. And that's just something that a lot of men have to understand. You had one mother. Most of us, you know, have one mother, but you have a mother but your girlfriend shouldn't, your wife shouldn't jump into that category. Like that's something that we all need to work on, and I'll come and say it on this show, and it's unacceptable. It's unacceptable for you to be in a whole ass relationship and your wife, your partner, your girlfriend your fiance has to mother you also.
Agreed.
Totally unacceptable.
That again, that's a boy. That's not a man.
Correct.
Doesn't matter your age.
Correct.
So I've said this before, but this is something that I just made up that I've learned this year. I firmly believe there are 3 different roles you can play in a relationship, and specifically, I mean partner, marriage, romantic, etc. Whatever you want to call that. I really believe there's 3 S's. You can be somebody's savior, you can be somebody's sponsor, and you can be somebody's support. I'll explain those real quick. Savior, not a religious context. That just means that you're there to save them. So, a coddled mother, right?
Yep.
Like you're talking about. That example I gave of the woman that's letting her 35-year-old stay with her to find himself. I got to find myself. I'm 35, right? Fucking don't find yourself, go work. So, savior, right? Like I am going to somehow save this other person. You can't save anybody. That's what God is for. That's what your higher power is for. That's what something else is for. That's what you are for, right? The only way to save yourself is by getting in touch with your God or your higher power, your universe, whatever you want to call it, and getting in touch with yourself. That's it. Those are the only ways to save yourself.
Right.
Prove me wrong. It's true. Another person cannot save you. And we live in such a codependent, insanely saving world. Just listen to any song, watch any movie, watch any TV show, and it's always about, oh, the one is going to save me somehow. And it's bullshit. It doesn't work. So you could be somebody's savior. Doesn't work. Don't ever do it. If you're in that relationship right now, end it immediately or figure out a way to get out of that role. Second one is sponsor. So that one's not quite as bad. But that, for me, comes from like a 12-step context. So if people aren't familiar with a 12-step context, all a sponsor is they help a sponsee. Basically, they're a mentor that just helps them walk through the steps. So that could be a coach. It could be like what you do, right? It could be just a pastor, whatever it is, somebody like that. The problem with being a sponsor is that you automatically are up here and this person's down here. Not necessarily that you're better than them. It's just you're trying to teach them how to go along the road that you've already gone on. Well, that's more like a parent parent-child relationship or a teacher-student relationship, is that really the relationship you want to be in? Like maybe to a degree, right? Like maybe I've gone through this stuff and I can help I'm not married, but if I had a wife, right? Like I can help my wife along with this, and she's been through something and she can help me through that. That's fine. But if there's a power dynamic where one person's mainly the sponsor and the other person's mainly the sponsee, it doesn't work.
Right.
But the third one is what we're going for, right? Support. You're going through something, I have experience from it. You're going through something, I have experience from it. And again, vulnerability on my own show. I've definitely been in situations in the past and frankly just got out of a relationship not that long ago where one of the reasons I decided to end it is because I found out that I was being more of a savior and a sponsor than I even kind of realized. Like it just kind of happened. And at a certain point when that continues, you got to figure out what to do. And maybe you can change it. Maybe you can redirect it. I had to end it. And it was hard as fuck. But it just doesn't work in relationships. It doesn't work in friendships, right? Like, do you want to be in a friendship where somebody's your savior all the time? I mean, that could be the same codependency as a relationship, right? Where I just call my friend all the time and have him deal with my problems instead of me dealing with my own.
Right.
Again, that's not a man. I want to read one other thing that I read the other day, and then we'll get back to this. I just want to make sure I read this before it ended, because your talk about all the coaching with the girls that you do and having them take accountability and responsibility and owning their stuff. I read this the other day and it really resonated with me. So I'm just going to read it.
Okay.
It said, one time, somebody was telling the story. They said, one time when Kobe Bryant, GOAT, right? One of the best basketball players of all time. If you're listening or watching this, you have no idea who Kobe Bryant is because unfortunately he passed away several years ago. One time when Kobe Bryant missed 3 shots to give his team the win, he sat down on the bench with his head down and his hands over his head. When he began walking off the court, a reporter cornered him and said, "Wow, you must feel terrible for missing those shots." Listen to this, Mark. This gave me chills. He looked at the reporter and said, "What's feeling got to do with it? I was working out why I missed those shots. I now know why I missed those shots, and I can do something about it." How powerful is that?
That's Kobe. That's Kobe to the core. That is
Dude.
Kobe to the core.
Absolutely. That's a GOAT that is more concerned with his mission and his purpose and his goals in life, whether you love him or hate him, right? Like Kobe had a lot of people that hated him because he was so intense.
Yeah.
So, but whether you love him or hate him, you got to respect that, because that is a man that has a vision that knows exactly where he's going. Did he make mistakes and failures? Of course he did. But he knew exactly where he was going, and he became one of the best of the world at it.
Yeah.
That's the guy I want to follow. Even if the guy, like, people are like, "Oh, he's a jackass." That's fine. I'll follow a jackass that has a mission and a purpose and a goal and is going to accomplish that and is going to inspire a lot of people along the way, way more than I'm going to follow this 35-year-old that just is now living with his mom again to find himself.
Full circle. Went full circle with that. I love it. You're absolutely right. Like Kobe never wavered. Like he never tried to be something he wasn't. Like he was so just focused and mission centric that it's one of the hardest workers and to a detriment. Like to a detriment.
Absolutely.
But that's who he was. That's who he was. You know, we want people to kind of what you said before. I just want to know who you are. Like, don't be this guy who comes in and works hard when coach is watching. Hey, coach, and I want the guy who wants to do it when the cameras aren't on him. I want the woman who wants to do it when no one's watching her. And that's who Kobe was. And that's who a lot of the greats are. Like we see the finished product most of the time. We don't see the hard work.
Absolutely.
And I always, I preach that to the people I coach, and it's all about what can you do for yourself? Like, don't worry if I'm around. Don't worry if I'm around. What can you do for yourself?
Yeah, I don't remember the exact numbers, and I wish I had it pulled up in front of me because this would be a better story. But I heard somebody telling this story about Steph Curry, also one of the best basketball players of all time, and unarguably the best three-point shooter of all time, because he's made the most threes of anybody ever by far. Look at the numbers.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous how much more it is than everybody else. And they were, and I think, again, I can't remember the numbers, but I think he's made like 3,000 threes or something in his life. I don't know. Maybe you could Google it while I'm talking so I don't put my foot in my mouth here. But what somebody did is they basically asked Steph, like, how many three-pointers have you practiced every single day? And it was like 100 a day or something since he was like 15 years old or something. It was some insane number. And what it ended up being, and by the way, if you see the number, just tell me.
You're pretty close, actually.
What was
I
it?
think it's like 3,700.
Okay,
So,
yeah. So this
yeah.
must have been. This was a couple years ago. So there you go. Now it's even more. Now it's almost 4,000. But here's the point. What they did is they added up how many he practiced, and it was like 3 million. It was like 3 million to make 3,000. So I get down on myself often about things that I'm trying.
Right.
I get down on myself for not having as many viewers or listeners to the podcast as I want or expect or think that I should have based on the content, all that sort of stuff. I get down on myself for where I'm at in business. I get down on myself for how I'm being a parent. Like, it's easy to get down on yourself for whatever you want. Relationships, like, pretty much failed every relationship I've ever had. You know, like, it's easy to get down on yourself with this stuff. But man, doesn't that just open up the perspective of how hard you have to work to be who you want to be? I mean, the mental resilience and how clear your why has to be
Yes.
to shoot 3 million shots to make just 3,000. A fraction of what you're practicing for. So I guess that would be my word to anybody that's listening and watching this, to the people that are watching this, is like, it takes a shit ton of work to get a fraction.
Yep.
And here's another example. So this is one that I found recently, and then I know we're going to wrap this up here in a second. I want to know what your kind of final words are to men. But here's a recent example that I saw, and that is for anybody that knows Mr. Beast. He is either the most popular YouTuber or really close to it. He has like 300 million subscribers or something like that now. And this isn't about whether you love him or hate him. There's also some drama about him right now. I don't give a shit about any of that. Here's what I care about, is that he posted a little while ago on his X account, and it was a picture of the amount of subscribers he had on YouTube throughout the years. First year, 1 subscriber. Think about that for a second, everybody. 1 all year. He did a year worth of video, and he had 1 subscriber. Then it went to like 25, and then 75. And then I think the 4th year he hit 1,000. 4 years. He put in 4 years of doing work, making YouTube videos, which is not easy, by the way.
Nope.
Not easy, especially the YouTube videos he made. The YouTube videos that I make of this are a lot easier because it's just us talking. It's a lot less editing. For him, it was a lot more. For 4 years to even get 1,000 people, and those 1,000 people weren't paying him shit. So he wasn't making any money. It wasn't until 7 to 10 years down the line that he even started making money. So people see Mr. Beast and they're like, oh, 300 million subscribers, I'll just do it like that. Yeah. No, it took him 4 years to do basically nothing. But what he said in the post is, he said, I decided when I started that I was going to give everything to be a YouTube sensation, and there wasn't anything that was going to detract. Clearly it worked. Clearly that never left his brain. And now he's the most successful YouTuber ever.
That's the Kobe mentality we're talking about. It's, I don't care what people say. I don't care who's in my way. I'm going through them, and I'm gonna be a champion, and I'm gonna make the shot. That's total focused, laser focused, tunnel vision focused.
Absolutely.
And people, that's a rare talent. That is a rare talent.
Well, Mark, as we're wrapping up here, is there anything that you just want to leave the audience with? Anything that you haven't said, or anything that you'd like to add?
Yeah, first of all, again, Josh, thank you so much for letting me do this. I told you before the show I was traveling, and I didn't want to cancel this, and I didn't want to, reschedule this or anything like that, because, a lot of the things we've talked about in this show is happening in real time for me. So I have, taken a step back, and I won't be hosting the 6 a.m. show anymore. And my last show will be the end of this month, which we're recording in September. and I'm taking a little hiatus from my show, Relatively Normal, because, you know, I sat down and reprioritized some things this weekend, and a lot of it had to do with Carl Berryman, who has been on my show before, and you know, we send each other video messages, and we instead of texting back and forth, it's easier to pick up your phone and send it back and forth. And he had sent me a message, and I'm terrible at texting. Listen, I'm terrible at sending people messages back, and he sent me something and DM'd me 2 days later. He was like, dude, check your messages. And I was like, I'm so sorry. So he sent me a video, and I sent a response to him. And immediately he wrote back. He's like, hey, man, what's up? Like, you're off. What's going on? I was like, crap. I was like, I thought I masked it better than I did. I was like, listen, nothing I can't fix. And he's like, hey, I know this dude that does a podcast that tells men to open up about their feelings. I was like, son of a bitch. Like, you son of a... And I was like, listen, I got too much going on. You know, my relationship at home and my sleeping and all that stuff is taking a hit because I'm trying to do too much. I need to end it with a 6 a.m. show. And it hurts saying that because I love that show. I put so much work into that show, and
it's your baby.
It's 6 a.m. is not as much as my baby as Relatively Normal is, but we
all have favorite kids.
Yeah,
it's okay.
Exactly. It's become my baby, and you know, 𝐤𝐸 who created that show and gave it to me, and I felt really bad, but I was like. So yesterday I sent the email out where I kind of resigned from the show, and it wasn't, hey, let me take a break and come back to it. It was, listen, I've done, I want to say close to 150, 200 shows with that show. And it's like, move on, have some time for yourself. Like, you haven't been doing as much for yourself as you say, and you're this guy who likes to stay busy and stay productive, and at what cost though? So when I get on these shows and I talk about men prioritizing themselves and prioritizing their time and being the best versions of themselves, I had to listen to my own advice. And I did it in the last few days. So as much as I want people to go to 6amrun.com and look at the products they offer, and as much as people want to, listen to my show Relatively Normal, because I've conversations like this, just know in the next few months there's going to be a pause on me recording shows. And before I recorded this one, I think I canceled eight shows that I was scheduled to do because I had to take a mental health break. And so I want men to understand that there's no shame in prioritizing your own mental health. There's no shame in prioritizing your own physical health. Like, you wanting to look good in a bathing suit is not a bad thing. Like, that opens up so many more possibilities of you being able to be a good father to your kids. Like, I wanted to play around with my girls and make sure I was there for them when they want to go outside and play, and not be this dad that was out of shape. You asked me if there's anything else I wanted to say. I wanted to say this, and I usually have a spiel about being, prioritizing yourself, and you're the most blah, blah, blah. I'm going to say it this time, like, make sure you're holding yourself accountable. I say some pretty, deep stuff on my show, and I tell people what they could be doing and how they can help themselves and how they can. And I needed to turn that around, and I needed to hold myself accountable. And that's what I did. And it's tough, it's awkward, but once I felt that awkwardness, I was like, I made the right decision. I made the right decision. So you're the first podcast host that knows this. I haven't said it. I haven't put anything out about it, but people are going to learn from you, and that's why I didn't want to cancel anything. And so thank you again for allowing me to be on this show.
Well, Mark, this whole show and my whole goal here is for men to be truth. Thank you for sharing all of that. And also, I feel completely honored that you still decided to do today.
Yeah.
I really do. It means a lot, because I think we had a really good conversation. I really enjoyed all your wisdom and just everything that you brought to the show. And I hope the listeners did as well. So if you did, please, as usual, like and subscribe to the show. And again, more importantly, and please do this, please send this to one man, just one man in your life that you think could take a lot from Mark's beautiful wisdom that he shared with us today. Just one, because and tell him to listen to it, because there are so many things that Mark said today that are just golden that men need to hear today. So I appreciate you, Mark. Check out the resources for Mark's stuff. It'll be in here. And again, even though he's exiting, still go listen to the podcast. It's great stuff that he's doing right there. We need more men in the world like Mark. So Mark, thank you for being one of those men.
Thank you, Josh. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. All right. So for everybody else, stay tuned for next week. We'll have another episode. Thank you so much for tuning into the Derelicts podcast, and we'll see you later, you derelicts.